How about now? Sort of muffled. Is it better now? Too loud? Okay, Beseder. So I'm just going to reiterate that this class is dedicated Li'ilui Nishmas, Sarah Bas Mendel, and whose Yortzeit I believe is today, and also on the occasion of the 100th Yortzeit of Yitzchak ben Avram Cohen. So thank you very much. Everybody owes a Hakar Tov, a little gratitude to the person who funded today's class. And we should get started. Thank you for being patient. So we are in chapter 42. And you have the chapter in front of you, or you have your own Sifrei Tehillim, wherever you may be. We have, let's see. Okay, so, okay, so we are in line with, in tune with what we've been doing wherever there's an allusion to the type of song, right? So we have several chapters where Rabbi Nachman himself provided us a hint to what the spiritual type of song is being expressed by each of the chapters of TIKKUN HAKLALI. One thing I didn't mention, which is sort of at the bottom of one of the lessons, I'm not going to put it up now because I don't want to take more time to upload it, but one of the lessons that deals with TIKKUN HAKLALI, so in it at the very end, Rabbi Nachman says that we have 5 qualities of divine mercy and 5 qualities of divine judgment. We call them chasadim u'nubrot, which means to say the fullness of expression of all of the sfirot really breaks down into 5 and 5 in terms of their energies. Now, even though we would, for those who are familiar with the kind of layout of what the spheres look like, so I'm just going to kind of make a quick diagram. Yeah. So if we count our 10, we'll call it Keter, is up there, Chochma and Bina, and then Chesed and Gvura, and Tiferet, and Netzach, and Hod, Yesod, and Malchut. Okay, so that's a total of 10 points. Is everybody following me? I'm sorry, I don't mean to get so esoteric at the outset, but it's actually an important point. For those who are not familiar with the idea and are wondering why I made all these points here, so you see that on the right-hand side, these qualities, I'm not going to write them out because I'm using a touchpad and it's really hard. Maybe next time I'll take out my, I have a drawing tablet for illustration. So actually I could probably do a lot better if I use that. So I hope I'll remember for next time. In any case, so we have our right side points, right? We'll call them these. And then we have obviously our left side points. Those are 3 and 3. And then we have another 4 that run down the middle line that sort of skew either to the right or to the left, depending on what they are. And so I'm not going to go into which way they skew and why. I'm just telling you that all of these 10 points from Keter, crown, all the way down to Malchut, and I'm not going to go through a whole explanation of this Sefirot now because it's really outside of our purview, but the truth is that it really does have a lot to do with our TIKKUN HAKLALI because each of our 10, Rabbi Nachman implies, it's not really an implication, he's pretty clear about it, that the means through which the Psalms heal is because they are breathing life into, we spoke about this in the first introductory lesson, they help to bring joy and vitality back to the points, these essential points of our soul expression, which are called Sfirot. So everybody has their Keter aspect, their crown. Everybody has their Chochma aspect, their Bina aspect, their this and that aspect going all the way through. Because we say, Umi b'sari achazeh Eloka, from my flesh I see God. It means to say that the divine attributes are mirrored within me. That's what it means to be created in the image of God. So when we talk about there being 10 chapters, we understand, even though Rabbi Nachman did not delineate which one is associated with what, he didn't go that far. He just gave us a general guideline to let us know that these 10 chapters have a therapeutic effect on all of these 10 different, we'll call them like spiritual pulse points. Did I tell the story about the Baal Shem Tov and the healing? I don't know if I said it here, but I'm gonna tell it because I'm not gonna tell it now because I really want to be able to learn the whole chapter today. And we have enough time, so we shouldn't have to rush, but I want to be thorough. So the only thing I really just want to make clear is that it's like our channels of vitality can get occluded or can get blocked because of the wrongs that we do. Like last week's Parsha was our Parshat Yisro. Parshat Yitro goes through, I mean, it's of course the whole experience of standing at Sinai. And now we know that the Torah is includes so many more mitzvot than just the 10 that were pronounced at Sinai. Nevertheless, the idea of there being 10 is very important for us because it means that, and this is something that's been discussed throughout the earlier sources, from the time of the Geonim and onward, and perhaps even before, that all 613 commandments of the Torah really break down into 10 basic subject headings, so to speak, and those are called the Aseret HaDibrot, those 10 main modes. They're like subject headings or, category headings of a whole range of mitzvot that fit into their rubric. And so, since Rabbi Nachman has been talking to us until now about this idea of the Tikkun HaKlali as a general remedy, a spiritual remedy for the fallout and damage that's caused by sin, so it makes sense that it's 10, because there are 10 main modes, and these 10 main modes find their expression and their fulfillment through all of the mitzvot of the Torah in many different ways. So if anybody wanted to learn more about how mitzvot, the 613 mitzvot break down into 10 main modes, so one of the classic sources about that is found in the writings of Rav Saadia Gaon. There are others. And it's an interesting way to try and reframe our understanding of the mitzvot, meaning being general. They all break down to kind of general areas, and those are expressed best by the Aseret HaDibrot, those 10 pronouncements at Sinai. Now, when we talk about there being 5 and 5, that's something Rabbi Nachman talks about in the lesson. So he says there are 5 gerot and there are 5 chasadim. There are 5 aspects of spiritual, we'll call it structure, stringency, whatever you want to call that, and 5 kind of more expansive attributes. And so our 10 chapters also break down into 5 and 5, the 5 expansives and the 5 that are associated more with din. So let us, on that note, we'll start Mem Bet. Now, our chapter 42 is the beginning of the second book of Tehillim. When I say the second book, I assume everybody, I'm not going to assume anything, actually. I'm not going to say I assume everybody knows. When you finish the whole book of Tehillim, or if you're sitting with a group of people and you share it out, so there's a special prayer that you say at the end of it, and it changes its form, whether it's during the weekday or whether it's Shabbos and a festival. So, but the basic idea in both of them is that we are acknowledging that there's a parallel between the 5 books of the Torah and the 5 books of Tehillim. So 150 chapters break down evenly into 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, but they break down somewhat close to that. And the breaking up of them is very interesting in the way in which they parallel, which is a separate study all by itself. Now, our last chapter, 41, is I mentioned as we finished, the end of the first book, and 42 is the beginning of the second book. One thing that's pointed out by one of the commentators that I'm going to focus on him today, I really enjoy him, the Dat Sofrim. So the Dat Sofrim points out that there's a major shift in the second book of Tehillim from, which is noticed, it's a shift in tone, and it's most noticeable in the fact that the name of God that is most prevalent in the usage in the verses in the first book of Tehillim, the name of God that's most prevalent is what we call the Shem Havaya, the 4-letter name of God that's spelled Yud. We call it Yud K Vav K, or it's really Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. Once we shift into the second book, it's not the same. It changes over to Elokim. I mean, just to give you an idea, there's a very interesting, just to give you an idea of how distinct this is. So in the entirety of the second book of Tehillim, what we call, the second fifth, it's not an even fifth, but it's close. The name Havaya, which is, I said, the Shem Yud Ke Vav Ke, is mentioned 17 times. And the name Adni, what we call Adnut, where it says Adonoi or Adoni, usually Adonai. So that is mentioned 14 times. And guess how many times the name Elohim shows up? 136. Okay, so that's a lot. Now, that's like we'll call it statistically significant. So when it's so obvious this way, so it means that there's a shift in the quality of prayer and in the content of the chapters. And what they are addressing over and over again throughout the whole second book is the manifestation of God's judgment, his attribute of judgment in the world, which is associated with the name Elohim. The name Elohim literally means Bal HaKochot Kulam, right? Kale or Ale in Hebrew means force. And Elohim implies master of all forces, not multiple forces, but master of all forces. Elim in Hebrew would be many forces. Elohim or Eloha over the Elim. That's the basic idea. God or major force, the force that is in control of all forces. So when we talk about this name Elohim, and just entering into our 42nd chapter and entering into our second book of Tehillim, just to be clear in our minds that the chapters that come out in our second book are wrestling with the subject of divine judgment. Now, that's important to bear in mind because Rabbi Nachman tells us that once we get to this chapter, so what are we up to? We've done already 16, 32, 41, and now we're up to 42. So we are 4 chapters into our TIKKUN HAKLALI. And in our 4th chapter, the type of song, spiritual song, what did we have so far, if everybody remembers? We had bracha, right? Bracha, maskil, michtam, and we had an ashrei, but it wasn't the ashrei, right? An ashrei that wasn't the ashrei. Yes or no? Am I getting mixed up? Ashrei, then it wasn't the ashrei. I didn't put up the list here. I should have. So we have. Let me just pull it up, so I'm not talking out of my, my elbow, whatever you want to call it. So we have this chapter, which once we get to that, we see that it's definitely focused on shira. Now, shira in Hebrew means song. Here, shira means song. Here's our first one is bracha. We did have ashrei, then maskil. We didn't have michtav. Bracha, ashrei, maskil, and shir. That's our number 4. After that is nitzuach, and so on. So shir, the verse in question in our chapter, this week's chapter. So shir comes up. Balayla uvalayla shiro imi. Yomam yitzaveh Hashem chasdo, yitzaveh chasdo, uvalayla shiro imi tefillah lekil chayai. So uvalayla shiro imi. His song is with me. And shiro, right, is written with a hey instead of with a vav, which we'll see inside. Even though it's pronounced as if it had a vav, shiro as opposed to shira, it means his song. Balayla shiro imi. Now, okay, so that's a clear, that's like a clear corollary. It's not like one of these ones where we had before a verse in Mishlei, which is the key word to let us know maskelet, right? Me'ashem isha maskelet, maskil. We had that already. That's not what's going on here. It's pretty straightforward. Shir and shiro, the correlation. Nevertheless, we're going to need to understand, what does it really mean? What is the nature of the song, the spiritual song or the therapeutic song of the song at night specifically? Okay, now fits in with what I've said so far about this chapter being concerned, and it's typical. It's the good introductory chapter into the second book of Tehillim, that it's typical of the second section of Tehillim, this preoccupation with harsh judgment or the challenges of exile. So that's the idea of the Laila, the nighttime, which we'll get to when we get to it. Now, one last thing before we go into the verses. I mentioned before about the 5 books of Tehillim paralleling the 5 books of the Torah. So we have the beautiful prayer that's at the end of, when you complete the book of Tehillim or a book of Tehillim, or you share out the whole Sefer Tehillim. the whole book of Tehillim, either way. So when we say that prayer, we say this one is keneged, right? This book of Tehillim is keneged. This part of Tehillim, this fifth or this book 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parallels Bereshit, Shmot, Vayikra, Bamidbar, and Dvarim. What does that really mean? So Reb Nosson explains in another place. We have to understand that even though David HaMelech is not the only author of Tehillim, which is actually appropriate for today, because the chapter of Bnei Korach does not originate with David HaMelech, even though he was the redactor. But what does it mean? Well, when we talk about Tehillim, we're always talking about David HaMelech, but they're not really all his. So what does it mean when we say that this book is parallel to that book? We have to realize that David HaMelech's prayers, or we'll call them the Psalmist's prayers because there's more than one. So the Psalmists, plural, mostly David, but plural. The Psalmist's prayers are, as Reb Nosson explains, and really it's because Rabbi Nachman kind of hinted to this in several lessons, what they express is the taking of Torah concepts and turning them into prayers so that they become actualized. So when we say that this book of Tehillim parallels this book of the Chumash, what it really means is that there's a relationship between prayer and Torah and prayer. And one of them without the other is incomplete. They have a kind of marriage bond between them. And prayer is always meant to be the bolsterer of Torah, the facilitator, we'll call it the Ezer Kenegdo, right? The kind of feminine aspect that is the supporter and facilitator of Torah, because it's not enough to learn. Lo hamidrash ha'ikar ela ma'aseh. The point is not just to learn, the point is to actualize it and bring it into the realm of action. And how are you supposed to do that? Except by way of prayer. So David HaMelech is full, or we'll say the psalmists, right? The psalmists are full of this language of show me your will. Hareini Hashem darkecha. Show me your way. Bring me to carry out your mitzvot. Toratcha b'toch me'ai. Your Torah is inscribed within my inward parts. It's full of expression of yearning and longing to be able to come to carry the Torah out into fulfillment. So one parallels the other. Now, when it comes to the second book, so there is this preoccupation with judgment, with divine judgment, like chapter 2. Chapter 1 was really sweet, right? That's the first book, full of the Shem Havaya. Chapter 1 of the Jewish people is filled with Maaseh Avot, is filled with the narrative of our origins and all of the lessons that we have learned from that. And in all of the book of Breshit, there's only 3 mitzvot. It's not a book of law. It's a book of Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim. It's like the precursor and the underlying infrastructure of divine will as it's manifest in the world. So it's appropriate that our first book is filled with Shem Havaya. Before the Torah was given, it says 26 generations lived on Chesed, Olam Chesed Yiboneh, and that means before we were kind of in the covenantal relationship as a people, for the greater task of maintaining the existence of the universe. Yom HaShishi, right? The sixth day, Yom HaShishi is waiting for Yom HaShishi. That sixth day, which is the culmination of creation, is waiting, like Rashi says, for the sixth day of Sivan, when the Jewish people will receive the Torah. And that's already in our second book, where we enter into this kind of covenantal relationship of quid pro quo, sort of. We have obligations, we have to fulfill them, loads of mitzvot. So that's a transition that we make. Now, Lamnatzeach Mazkir Livnei Korach. Lamnatzeach, we've already spoken about this because we've had this intro before in the previous chapter. This is a psalm to the one who grants victory. That's the Menatzeach, or just on the on the plain straightforward meaning it's instruction to the choir master. Maskil Livnei Korach. Now we said already last time, just a review, when it says a maskil, there are only so many chapters. I think there's only 6 chapters with the word maskil as a heading, which means that these chapters require a special study. And as is brought down by Rashi, very often they involve the work of the Maturgaman. that some other person was there in order to explain to the majority of people what is the upshot and how you're supposed to carry out the teachings of this particular psalm. So we have to first understand what's difficult about this psalm, meaning why would it be so challenging? And why is it necessary for us to involve the Meturgaman? What's challenging about this psalm? Now we're going to see from the second verse already what's challenging about it. So we'll just have to leave that question in our minds and wait till the next verse to be able to understand what is not, what kind of lesson needs a little bit more explication before we can really gain the most from this psalm. And who wrote this psalm? Well, it's called Livnei Korach. Now, who are the Bnei Korach? First of all, so we have several psalms that are attributed to the Bnei Korach, to the Sons of Korah. Now, the Sons of Korah, for the most part, were destroyed in Korach's rebellion. But we know that there were 3 sons of Korah who regretted their involvement in the rebellion, and they did tshuva as they were descending down into the pit. Their names were Asir, Elkanah, and Evyasaph. So those 3 brothers, it says in the Medrash Tehillim, what happened was they were preserved in a ledge underground, so that they didn't descend down into they didn't descend all the way down into the nether regions with the rest of the men of Korach's rebellion. They were sort of suspended in a hidden, protected place where they had the opportunity to sing their songs of contemplation and teshuvah and reconnection with Hashem, to express their regret from having banded together with Korach. And so, what eventually happened to them? So the tradition that we have is that they eventually, their descendants, being Levim, because the family of Korach were from the tribe of Levi, being Levim, they had a role and they passed down this tradition of the songs of Korach down until the time of King David, at which point King David, when it was time for him to kind of put together and redact his Tehillim, so he included them. So we understand, and the reason why I say that it's redacted is because there's a difference between preserving something that's intact from earlier times or making changes to it. The assumption is that David HaMelech did make changes to the Psalms of Bnei Korach that were handed down as a kind of tradition, but that he, with his Ruach HaKodesh, with his divine inspiration, that he kind of put a final stamp on that, and that's because the sages indicate in certain places in the Talmud that King David authored them, and in other places it says the Bnei Korach authored them. The way that you manage to put those two opinions together is to say that they originate in the Bnei Korach, but they were redacted by David. So this is a psalm that goes back. It's a maskil, which means to say it's got a deep moral lesson, and it needs some rendering in order to be able to glean everything we need to glean from it. And it's attributed to Bnei Korach, who, like I mentioned, the three sons of Korach, who had regretted their involvement in Korach's rebellion. Ka'ayal taro galafike mayim, like an ayal. An ayal is translated as a hart or a deer. Ta'arog alafike mayim. Now the word ta'arog alafike mayim, first of all, the language here is just a side Breslov point, because in Breslov we have a tradition, even though I haven't been talking about them until now, but this is the first chapter that we've had where it's really obvious. We have a tradition of what we call hisbodedus nigunim, kind of traditional contemplative meditative melodies that are incorporated into, or have been, for the last 200 years, incorporated into people's hitbodedut practice. So some of them are, directly linked to certain verses in Tehillim. Some of them are just tunes. Some of them have kind of like folk words. They have words in Yiddish to them that are not necessarily psukim. There aren't really verses. So, and sometimes they're a mixture of the two. So, Ka'ayal Tarog Alafike Mayim is a big one. I would sing it for you. Maybe I should sing it for you. But it's very stirring, and I happen to love it very much. It's one that I go back to all the time. Now, what's interesting about the words ka'ayal ta'arog al afikei mayim is ta'arog, the root of the word ta'arog sounds like it should mean like a deer that is whatting exactly after afikei mayim, after springs of water. Well, I mean, the what of the ta'arog means to have erga. Now, in Hebrew, erga means to yearn or to long for something, something that you desire very much, hava and erga. But the implication is that the ta'arog or the erga is expressed in a kind of, it's kind of like a wordless cry that just expresses the desire and the longing and the yearning. So it's not just the desire, because that's the tzimaon. You see in the next pasuk, we're going to talk about tzama nafshi lelokim. I should switch this back to y'all. Tzama nafshi, and that's tzimaon. Tzimaon is the thirst. And when we get to the ta'arog, it's kind of backwards, because we would have assumed that the psalmist would first tell us about the feeling and then how it's expressed outwardly. But in this case, it's reversed. And first we hear about this kind of roar. It's like this, roar is not the right word because a deer wouldn't roar, but it's sort of like this moaning. It's a hamaya of longing and yearning. Now, the Meforshim, our sages, our commentators explain that afikei mayim, what are afikei mayim? Afikei mayim, we've come across this word before in Tehillim, ka'afikim b'negev, and so on. So you can have streams, right, that in the winter run fairly regularly, because afikim is from language of, afik in Hebrew means something that bursts out, that, like bursts forth. So if we imagine out in the desert, there are times of year when the rains have been coming, or there's the groundwater is like really full, and people don't realize like even what that even means. I mean, if you come to the Dead Sea, so I highly recommend if you come to Israel, if you're in Israel, you can go there yourself. Get on a bus. You don't even have to take a car. Get on a bus. You pick it up at near Ma'ale Adumim, near the turnoff to Ma'ale Adumim that's up by the university, and it runs all day long. And it's the bus that heads on the coast of the Dead Sea. And you get off a little bit after Qumran. You get off the bus at a stop that's for Ein Facha, which is called Einot Tzukim. And when you go to Einot Tzukim, you'll be very surprised to find that right on the shore of the Dead Sea, there are freshwater springs that are constantly replenishing themselves from the trickle-down groundwater that accumulates from the hills above. Those are called the Tzukim, right? So there are these cliffs up above, and the waters run down in rivulets, and they go down into the ground, but from the ground they then spring upward as you get closer to the coast of the sea, of the Dead Sea. So when you get into Einot Tzukim, there's all this fresh water there, and you say, oh my goodness, where is all this coming from? It's just coming up from the ground. Now, the idea of afikim is that we have, because of the unique terrain of Eretz Yisrael, so we have times of year when there'll be nothing. There's just these ravines. And then suddenly, when the season is right, so there's all this water that's coming through there, and it looks like a river that's running like a river, or a stream that's running like a stream. Now imagine we have the ayal, it's interesting because it says ka'ayal ta'arog, right? Ayal implies a male, and then it says ta'arog, that's feminine verb. So it's like the masculine it starts with, but then it flips over into its feminine beseeching side. Not only because the feminine is the prayerful side, but also because it's the feminine prayerful side that's more likely to be answered with God's mercy. That's one of the reasons why people will ask, how come, for instance, we dedicated the shir, right? So we mentioned the names of the father, of women and men. The father's name is mentioned after a person has already left this world. When a man is called up to the Torah, he's called after his father's name. But when we're praying for somebody, we pray after the mother's name. Why? So we say because the mother is kind of summons and awakens God's mercy, because the mother is more merciful than the father. That's the idea of the Rachmanut and the Rechem, that the womb of mercy is associated with the feminine. So, Ka'ayel ta'arog ala fiki mayim, this expression of yearning and longing is this very feminine expression of yearning, so it's called ta'arog. Ala fiki mayim, upon these streams of water, because they're absent. Afike mayim, the deer goes to the stream expecting that, just like in the winter, there was running water there, and the deer is supposed to be able to drink, and this deer shows up at the spring where during the winter months they had the water, and now they say, oh my goodness, there's no water here anymore. And so and just the image that we have from the commentators is the deer just stands there in a state of feeling bereft, and cries out in yearning and longing for the water that was there before. Now that's very important for us, because the chapter is concerned with the loss of the Beit HaMikdash, or the loss of our inability to approach the place of holiness. So whether we call it the Beit HaMikdash, or whether we call it the sense of closeness and union with Hashem, this is a cry of the soul for, like, just imagine we're standing at the water source that we've enjoyed before, and we're just not feeling it. We don't have the benefit. So it's the cry of the soul and of the Jewish people as a whole in exile, not only distanced from our Beit HaMikdash, but it could be even during the time of the Beit HaMikdash, if a person was too far away from the Beit HaMikdash to reach it, or if it was between the Chagim, and they were not going to be able, like, when am I going to be able to go back up to the Beit HaMikdash? Masayavo ve'irah. The feeling of not having, contact anymore, and not being able to get back to that place, which applies to everybody, because we could all look back and say, oh, I remember a time when I felt so much closer to Hashem, or I had a time when I really felt connected, and then afterwards it's gone, and we stand there like this. Imagine ourselves, the deer, just standing in a state of just feeling bereft. So too does my soul yearn for you, Hashem. And you see how it's the name Elohim, because obviously it's a time of din, meaning it's a time of concealment, of hiddenness. The access isn't there. So what do we do now? And so we keep on expressing it. And what is it rooted in? Meaning, why am I crying? Now, sometimes a person, why do we say that this is a maskil? Remember, this chapter is called a maskil. Why? Well, because not everybody knows what they're missing. And not everybody understands the feeling of erga, of the soul. And sometimes if a person is not, like, they're not in tune with their spiritual yearnings, so they feel like something's missing, but they don't even know how to articulate it to themselves. And so we're told at the outset, this is a maskil. If you start talking, like, from the very outset, some people, they just look at you like crazy. What are you crying about? What are you yearning for? Why are you so focused on this? They don't get it. That's because this is a maskil. You need a meturgeman. Many people need someone to kind of translate this to them so they can understand it for themselves, because they don't get it. A person can walk around with unfulfilled yearnings, and it will express itself in other things. They may not realize that what they're looking for is a connection to Hashem. They think that they need to travel, or they think that they need more money, or they think that they need to accomplish something that they haven't accomplished yet. They have many different potential things that they might decide that they really want, when really, what's the nefesh feeling? Now, there's a difference between tarog elecha elokim and sama nafshi lelokim. See, here we're talking about the expression. It's like an outward expression of that yearning. When we get to the root of it, it's just simple. Sama nafshi lelokim. My soul is thirsty for Elokim. Now here it was elecha Elokim. That's directed. In the third pasuk, it's just a flat-out expression of yearning for contact with Hashem. I'm just thirsty for godliness. I can't live like this. Lekel chai. Now what does that mean? For the living God. I am thirsty for the living God. Now the term kel chai comes up in Tanakh. Yoshua uses the term when he speaks to the Jewish people, and he says, today you're going to see that God is kel chai, the living God, and he's talking about the fact that the Yarden is going to dry up in order to allow the Aron HaBrit, to cross over. It's when the Jewish people are passing over into the land. Meaning there's going to be a miracle. When there's a miracle, a supernatural miracle, you can't ignore the fact, you're not going to be able to miss the fact that God is involved in human events, and that's called Keil Chai. So when we say in Pasuk Gimel, Tzama nafshi le'elokim lekeil chai, what am I looking for? What am I thirsty for? No. Verse 3 doesn't, it's not a yearning for, Leah asked, does that mean we're looking for that aspect of Hashem? No, it means I'm acknowledging the fact that I'm living in the state of concealment. So the aspect of a Kadosh Baruch Hu that's available to me, we'll see at the end, Chesed comes up. At the very end, see, Chesed is mentioned. But really, it's from the place of concealment. So we're looking for Elokim. That means to say godliness as it's manifest in the place of concealment. Now, Lekeil Chai, right, the living God, is because we want to be able to feel it. We want to be able to see it. Not just have it be something theoretical, but something actual to us. Masai avo ve'roi pnei Elokim. Now, this is an interesting word also. Matai avo, when will I come? The implication is, when will I get to that place? And whether we're talking about the Mishkan in the Midbar, or the Mishkan in Shiloh, or the Beit HaMikdash, or come back to Eretz Yisrael, or to see the redemption, whether we're talking about a specific place, or whether we're talking about that place inside, Matai avo ve'era'eh pnei Elokim. Now, le'ra'ot is not the same as lir'ot. It's very important, because if we were going to say, when will I come ve'era'eh, what's the difference, for those of you who know Hebrew, what's the difference between er'eh and era'eh? Er'eh and era'eh. Er'eh is future tense, first person, and it means I will see. Era'eh means I will be seen. Right, exactly. I will see and I will be seen. Now, there's a major difference between the two of them. We have in the Torah, when it talks about coming up 3 times a year to the Beit HaMikdash, Yira'eh kol zechurcha. Shalosh pamim b'shana yira'eh kol zechurcha. All the males of the Jewish people must come and be seen. Now, the sages said, lir'ot ulahira'ot, to see and be seen. Means to say you got to show up. So, le'ra'ot means to show up and be seen. The implication is if I show up and I'm seen, I'm also going to see. But the verse doesn't promise me to see, because the seeing is contingent on a person's readiness to see. So all of the males of the Jewish people have an obligation to show up in Yerushalayim 3 times a year. Are they promised that they'll have visions? No. You have to, Yera'eh kol zechurcha. All of the males have to be seen there. But if they'll be seen there, hopefully they will see. So we say the Baal Nefesh, hopefully the Jewish people and I say males because that's the obligation, because women don't have the obligation upon them because they have other obligations upon them. But it's not as though, don't think women didn't also show up. If they were able to, they came up, like it says about Chana and Penina, that they went up with Elkanah. So we know that women also showed up. It's just they don't have the same degree of obligation. Now, the idea of showing up, right, just being there, and that somehow, hopefully, in being seen, I will be seen. So I'm not asking, Matai avo ve'er'eh pnei Elokim, because no one could promise me that. I just want to be given the opportunity to be able to show up. And in showing up, hopefully I'll be able to see Pnei Elokim. Pnei Elokim, when we talk about panim, and this term panim is going to come up several times. We have Pnei Elokim, we have panim. In the next chapter is also, even though it's not part of Tikkun HaKlali, is kind of a companion and an extension of this chapter. And so panim, they come up. It comes up 3 times, which actually is because there are 3 times a year that that one must show up to see the face of Hashem. Now, the face means direct conscious contact. That's what we call Pnei Elokim, because obviously we're not talking about seeing anything physical. We're talking about having an experience that makes it absolutely clear, right? Sama nafshi le'elokim lekeil chai. I want to have my soul is thirsty for God, for the living God. That means to say to have an actual experience of closeness with Him, so that it's undeniable. I should be able to feel in my bones that He's with me and active in my life. Matai avo, and then I add that, I say that with longing. Matai avo, when is it going to happen? That matai is not a question of, like the Dat Sofim says, I'm not asking, what day, what time. Matai avo is not about someone coming to give me the answer of exactly when it's going to happen. It is the answer itself, because I'm expressing the yearning of if only when will it be? And that's its own kind of answer. Matai avo ve'era'eh pnei Elokim. Haitali. Now, after having expressed all of this yearning, we kind of switch gears. At this point, the psalmist is acknowledging that at this point in time, we are not in good shape. And again, it's not just for the collectivity of the Jewish people, but really we're talking about the individual in the state of concealment, in exile. We have certain repeating themes in this chapter. We'll see they're like refrains, several refrains that come up again and again, and they also repeat in the next chapter, even though that's not part of our study because it's not part of TIKKUN HAKLALI, but for you it's important to know. So at this point, it's kind of, there's a lot of reminiscing in this chapter, also in the next one. A lot of reminiscing. My tears were for me like bread, day and night. Now, what does it mean to have tears like bread? Well, tears like bread means I was swallowing them, like they were a part of me, like bread, meaning they were my lechem chuki, like we would say, my daily bread. It means to say they were my daily allotment because I was suffering while in the state of exile or concealment. And we're going to see that according to some, the psalmists who shared this psalm with us, the Bnei Korach, they didn't necessarily have to be in exile physically at the time, because when they speak about their placement or where they were, if we're just looking on the level of the pshat, the very straightforward level, they may have been in Eretz Yisrael. That's not really the point. The point is that they felt like they were in the exile of the spirit, and that's the kind of lesson that they shared and passed down, which got redacted by David HaMelech. So, Haitali dimati lechem yomam v'layla. I was in that state really means I am in this state, right? Meaning it's been this way for I don't know how long. There's a kind of, in this chapter, a kind of blurring of the time boundaries. Some things that are clearly being spoken about in the future are something that's taking place now. We have things that are taking place now that are discussed of in the future, and then we have something that's spoken about in the past, which is the present state. There's a kind of blurring of the timing. And the reason why is because we'll see we're kind of floating back and forth in memory. This is how it's been for me. This is how in the future I'm going to be looking back. That's how it was. I look at things the way they used to be a long time ago, and it's very present to me as if it's happening right now. There's a kind of blurring of distinctions in the time. When was I crying? Also, the other way in which tears are like bread is that they, sorrow puts a person, even though some people eat from their atzabim, their stress and their pain. For many people, sorrow is like an appetite suppressant. It feels like you've eaten, you can't eat anything else. I have no appetite. So that's also the idea of dimati lechem. We have this kind of language in other places in Tehillim. Be'emor elai, what triggered it for me? Meaning, what triggered my feeling of being so bereft and feeling so lost? Be'emor elai kol hayom ayeh elokecha. Emor elai, it doesn't say omrim. Emor implies it is said to me, and it doesn't necessarily mean more than one person. It just means there's kind of this echo that goes around. Someone is saying to me, Elai, kol hayom, all day long, ayeh elokecha, where is your God? So it means from the place of concealment, the thing that really hurts me the most is not that I have to suffer, or not that I'm far away from Hashem, but that there's this voice, Emor elai kol hayom, ayeh elokecha. It's like this voice of doubt that comes from outside and it penetrates into me. Like Reb Nosson says, Reb Nosson speaks about this. He says that voice causes more sorrow and more pain and more suffering than chayot ra'ot, than predators and wild animals that can tear a person to bits, because that voice wants to, it's like stick the knife in to make, it's like adding insult to injury. It's not bad enough that you're in the state of concealment, but you have like this voice like, oh, and has God abandoned you? Ayeh elokecha, where? Ayeh is the ultimate statement of, I feel abandoned, right? Now we know that God doesn't abandon anything. I mean, all of the universe is being maintained and sustained by Him at every single second, every instant. So obviously He hasn't gone anywhere. But if He's not making Himself apparent in my life, and I don't feel like He is reaching out to me in order to help me, Well, that's the idea of Yeshua, which comes up later. So if I feel that I've been abandoned, then I am susceptible to the question of the doubter, which is outside of me. He might be outside of me, but he penetrates into me because I have this vulnerability here since I feel abandoned. And it's this terrible taunt question, Aye Elokecha, where is your God? It's very hard for us to answer. Eile eskira v'eshbachaya lenafshi. So I'm trying to comfort myself in Pasuk Hey. I try to comfort myself. Eile eskira, I remember these. V'eshbachaya lenafshi. And I pour my soul out upon myself. Now, the Das Ofrim, among others, points out here that we have a lot of, there's a kind of conversation going on in this chapter between different parts of the self. The psalmist speaks to his soul, asks questions of his soul, tries to give encouraging words to his soul. So we have this aspect of the nefesh, eshbachai lai nafshi, and there's like a voice of the sechel in a way, is a voice of the psalm, that's the maskil. And it's as if the sechel is speaking out its emotive reality, its spiritual and emotive reality of, this is how I feel like when I start to think about what things used to be like, of what things were like when we had a Beit HaMikdash, ke'avor basach, when I was passing along with the throng, right? The sach means like the sum total of the Jewish people, going up to the Beit HaMikdash. Edadem ad Beis Elokim. Now, edadem here can mean two different things. Edadem means counting my steps, measuring my steps until I got to the house of God. But edadem also means from the language of Dmima, edadem ad Elokim. The practice of the Jewish people when going up to the Beit HaMikdash was through the trek to be very measured in our steps and meditative, and not to talk too much on the way, until we get to the Beit Elokim, at which point, B'kol rina v'toda hamon chogeg. Then we get up to the Beit HaMikdash, and at that point we would burst out in a kol rina, in the voice of song, that means to say, just singing without any words, v'toda, and then, yes, expressing words of gratitude. First comes the feeling, and the nigun, and then comes the words. Hamon chogeg. And we had many multitudes of people who were celebrating together. So in Pasuk Hey, right, we go from a very deep transition. It's like Dalet, end of Dalet is Aye Elokecha, and then we just switch gears and say, one second, Aye Elokecha, let me think. Eile eskira v'shchai lai nafshi. My soul starts to feel poured out inside of me. And of course, that's the language, that's an expression of prayer, heartfelt prayer, that the soul is, or the heart is poured out like water, like it says, Shifchi kamayim libech nochach pnei Hashem, like it says in Echa, pour your heart out like water before God. And now, with this sechel, right, we said there's like different parts of the self speaking to each other, in communication with each other. So I go back into my memories. I have these deep collective memories in my holy imagination. What must it have been like? Why am I so caught up in my present worries and my present situation? You know, once upon a time there was a Beit HaMikdash. Once upon a time we lived with the Keil Chai, and he didn't go anywhere. It's just we're in a state of concealment now. So we have to go back in our collective memory to re-experience that. And then I'm able to go and speak to myself and encourage myself. Ma tishtachachi nafshi v'tehemi alai. Why are you so downcast or bent over? Lishtochech means like literally to be prostrate. Why are you so bombed out, nafshi, my soul? Why are you so devastated? V'tehemi alai, and you're crying and moaning. Hamaya is to express again like erga, right? The difference between erga, this ka'il ta'arog, which is a very pure kind of sound of yearning, and tehemi alai, which we say, no, that's not a good idea, is because it's all those conflicting thoughts that paralyze us, and doubts and worries and feelings of loss. So in the maskil, right, this spiritual intelligence says to the nefesh, don't be so broken, don't be so mevulbelet, don't be so confused. Hochili lelokim. You have to trust, place your trust and your hope. Tochelet is hope in God. Ki od odenu yishvot panav. Right? There will be yet salvation from His face. Remember, that's again the idea of the face. direct face-to-face communication from Hashem. He's involved. He's going to come back to us. We'll restore our relationship with Him. It's not the end of the story. We're still in the middle. Elokai. And now the psalmist turns to Hashem and kind of apologizes for having fallen into this state of brokenness. Elokai, alai nafshi tishtokach. Hashem, my soul feels so broken and so downcast within me. And it's a kind of like, I have to admit it, that this is where I am. Al-kain es korcha me'eretz Yarden. Al-kain here doesn't mean therefore, it means because of what? Es korcha me'eretz Yarden v'chermoni mahamitzar. Now we have three places being mentioned here, and there's different ways of understanding what they mean. What am I remembering, and how does it trigger my feeling of loss now? Because that's what's being admitted to in Pasuk Zayin. I admit, Hashem, to the fact that I tend to dwell on things, on what I've lost. And this leads me to feel bereft in not such a productive way. I have to be mechazik myself. I'm like, always have to pick myself up. Es korcha me'eretz Yarden v'chermonim mihar mitzar. Now, we could read that al-kain as because I am thinking of what? Well, I am in the Eretz Yarden. That's one way. I'm going to give you two different ways of reading these three places. The first is that the Bnei Korach, it's a very interesting way of looking at it. These Bnei Korach are Levi'im. And the Levi'im used to set up Torah outposts all over Eretz Yisrael in what would you say, like parallel or in the same area as Jewish communities all over Eretz Yisrael, even the most outlying and far-flung ones, in order to help teach the Jewish people living in those places Torah and to strengthen them. So these Bnei Korach we'll call them itinerant Levim, who apparently lived up by the Yarden, near the Chermonim, that's up in the Golan, right? And so they're close to the lands of the enemy. And so when we say they have like the enemy voice in their ear, it's not just because they're in a place of potential conflict. We see they are. We'll see from later, Retzach Batzmotai and so on. So they're potentially in a place of danger. But it's really also because it's a kind of like cultural exposure on the boundary of Eretz Yisrael to the non-Jewish perspective. And so this Ayeh Elokecha, where is your God? Where is your God? What's your God doing for you? This is something that the communities that were further away from Yerushalayim, that the further away they were, the more susceptible they were to this message. And so, Elokai alai nafshi tishtochach, for why? Why? Al-kain nezkorcha me'eretz Yarden v'chermonim mihar mitzar. Me'eretz Yarden, Chermonim, up there in the north. Mehar mitzar, from the little mountain. Means to say up there in the mountains. Now, the sages also tell us these are actually, we mention here three places of great miracles, right? The Yarden is the place that was split. The Chermonim up in the north is the place where we won miraculously. We won these battles against Sichon and Og. And Har Mitzar, the little mountain, is a reference to Sinai. So the pasuk can also be read in the other way. Elokai alai nafshi tishtochach al-kain. When I'm feeling myself bereft, how am I mechazik myself? How am I going to encourage myself? I remember the ways in which you have in the past dealt with us miraculously and intervened on our behalf. And that encourages me all over again. Tehom, this is such a strong pasuk. Tehom el tehom koreh lekol tzinorecha. Deep calls unto deep, or the abyss calls unto the abyss. It calls to the kol tzinorecha, to the sound of your pipelines. Now, when we talk about, well, let's go to the end of the verse. I'm just going to translate it and I'll give you the idea. Kol mishbarecha v'galecha alai avaru. All your breakers and waves have passed over me. Now, when we talk about tahom el tahom, when we talk about something being tahom, like, even in English, you say something is abysmal, right? So that's the idea of, mishpatecha tahom rabbah. Your judgments, Hashem, are like a deep abyss. It's the stuff that's underneath, that is underlying everything, that is so deep and so dark and so impossible to understand. And the communication between, we'll call them like, underneath in the area where the groundwater is, and down deep, there's caverns upon caverns under the earth, way below us. And there are rivers, mighty, mighty rivers that move within the realm of the Tehillim, back and forth, and they communicate with each other in channels miraculously, in means and ways by which we have no knowledge of them. So when we talk about this Tehillim and the Kol Tzinorecha, there's the sound of water moving through these subterranean channels is like a mighty ocean. You can't imagine what it would sound like because the channels are in the rock and the water is moving there at such high volume from place to place. If we could go underneath the earth and hear it, we would be overwhelmed by the sound of the communication that takes place between this deep, dark mystery and that deep, dark mystery. And of course, we're talking in this verse, in this parak, in this chapter as a whole, about how to reconcile ourselves to the reality in which we are, where we don't necessarily see or understand God's judgments, and why he does what he does, and why we have to suffer or live in this state of concealment. And this pasuk really expresses it very profoundly. Tehom el tehom koreh lekol tzinorecha, like there's this whole world of subterranean action, of communication between the depths of your judgment here and the depths of your judgment there. This part of my life, that part of my life, this event and that event. And it's all underneath the ground, and I don't know anything about it. It's all dark to me. It's the abyss to me. And even here in the world in which I live, where I'm not down in the abyss, but I'm standing on the shore, it's like another wave goes over, another wave breaks over me. It's one thing after the other. Now, of course, it also is a kind of rejoicing, because when we say Kol mishbarecha v'galecha alai avaru, one way we say it is, my goodness, what haven't I been through? And the other way we say it is, goodness, what haven't I been through? Like, look what I've gone through, but I'm still standing, right? Alai avaru, they've passed over me. So how we read it is very much, it's pretty telling in terms of how we see these events in our lives. Like, oh, I'm still standing. I can't believe I've had to go through this, but I'm still standing. Yomam yitzaveh Hashem chazdo. By day, Hashem commands his chesed. Okay, so you see how here we are. Yud Ke Vav Ke. And here comes the chesed. I've been through all of this and I'm still standing. Guess what? Because there are times in my life when I can see, like the daytime, like the sun is shining. And it's clear to me that Hashem is sending me messengers and agents of his kindness, his loving kindness. And what happens when I do not have those agents available to me? And I'm in the dark and it's the nighttime. What do I have instead? And here's our song, right? Here's our type of song. Uvalayla shiro imi. At night, his song is with me. Tefillah lekel chayai. Prayer to God is my life. Now, Rabbi Nachman taught on this. Tefillah lekel chayai means all of my vitality I have to get through prayer. And we talk about the shiro, right? Shiro, his song. It means the Torah and the prayer. At night, the song is the song of Torah and also the song of prayer. We think about David HaMelech and the way he organized his night. It says he slept for a little bit of time, and then at exact midnight, a north wind would blow through the kinnor that he hung above his bed. He had a musical instrument, and it hung above his bed, and it would vibrate the strings. And he would hear the song, and he would get up. And as he said, I'll get up at midnight to thank you for your statutes, your righteous statutes. And he would learn until the approaching dawn, at which point he would start to prepare for prayer in order to pray with the sunrise. And then after that, he spent his day adjudicating cases and taking care of the needs of the Jewish people. But that was his night. It means from midnight. What's the idea of uvalayla? Uvalayla means from the second half of the night, where already the chesed that will be coming during the day starts to flow down if a person takes advantage of the time of the night. So uvalayla shiro imi, right? David HaMelech again. It's the psalmist, the Bnei Korach, but nevertheless, David HaMelech is speaking. It's also considered to be his psalm. In the night, his song is with me. So it's his song that becomes my song. It's my song of consolation. It's the tefillah lekel chayai. It's the combination of Torah and tefillah that gives me strength and consoles me and empowers me so that I can manage to get through the night, which is the state of concealment and all this long exile. Omra lekel sal'i. At this point, I say, because now here I am, still back in the place of of concealment. I say Lekil, I say to God, Salim, Marak. That means to say, Hashem, you're my source of solidity, you're my foundation. Lama shachachthani. Why have you forgotten me? Does God forget? No. It's the same idea we had before. I'm susceptible to also feeling abandoned. Why have you forgotten me? Why do I have to be left here feeling abandoned? Why should I go? And again, koder is the language of darkness. It's like when something is, we say something is kedera, or the kedera is also the blackened outside of the pot, So, lama koder elech b'lachatz oyev. It's also in the language of Shir HaShirim. Under the pressure of the enemy, why should I be going around like I'm covered in darkness? I want to live in the light. I don't want to be in the dark. And again, we're still in the state of concealment. It's like I feel like I'm on the rack. I feel like my bones are I've been stabbed endless times. My enemies are always, they're at me. They don't leave me alone. There's voices of doubt. Ba'omram. You see how now it's plural? Above it was be'emur. Earlier it was be'emur elai. Now it's ba'omram. The voices get stronger. These voices of doubt and the voices of concealment. Kol hayom they're always asking this. Where is your God? Where is your God? The Jewish people have been abandoned. God is not interested in your fate. And each person individually goes through this. We go through this of feeling like, doesn't he care? Why is he leaving me like this? These are the doubts that beset us. It's being addressed directly. Again, now we finish off the chapter with words of consolation. Right? Again, speaking again to the self. Ma tishtochachi nafshi. Oh my soul, why are you so downcast? Why are you so bent over? And what are you so confused about? You have to place your trust and your hope in Hashem. Ki od odenu yeshuot panai velokai. This is very similar to the verse that we had before. Instead of yeshuot panav, it ends off panai velokai. Now that's more direct. Have trust and faith. Throw your hope onto Hashem. Ki od odenu, it's coming, it's coming. You just wait. Yeshuot Panai, the salvation of my face and my God. Right? So here we have a kind of overturning of all of the Ayokecha and all of the question marks. No. Odo denu Yeshuot Panai velokai. We're going to see him face to face. We'll see the salvation and experience it. Kel Chayai velokai. Now, of course, there's endless things more I could say, but time is pretty much up. And I incorporated, even though I didn't tell you all along, I was telling you from the Das Ofrim, from the Rishonim, and also from Reb Nosson. I just kind of brought it in there. But if anybody wants to be able to see it inside, if you want to have the sources, because instead I did put it up, and in the end I didn't go through them because I just wanted to give you the upshot. But it's all here, and if anybody would like the source to look more into what Reb Nosson has to say, I wouldn't have used all of them. There are some things that are just too complicated for doing in a 1-hour class on a whole chapter. But if anybody's interested, you could always send me an email. I'm happy to send it. Oh, sing the nigun, yeah. El tarohog alafi kemoyim Kayal tarog alafi kemoyim Kayal tarog alafi kemoyim Kayal tarog alafi kemoyim Kei nafshi sarog Kei nafshi sarog Kei nafshi sarog Elecha Elokim Kei nafshi sarog Elecha Elokim Kei nafshi sarog Elecha Elokim. צמא נפשי לאלוקים, לקהל חי. 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 מסע יבואי, מסע יבואי, מסע יבואי, מסע יבואי, מסע יבואי ויראה, מסע יבואי ויראה, מסע יבואי ויראה פני אלוהיקים. Have a beautiful week. It's not my niggin, it's Breslov. Actually, there's a third point. There's a third point that goes into Yiddish. What's gone is already not here anymore, Father. So that's the end part. Take care. Have a beautiful week. Thank you for hanging in. Is it available on CD? Yeah, actually, there has to be. I'm just not sure. Breslov Research Institute on one of the CDs for sure did a rendition of it. I just don't know where. So I have to think about that. Send me an email. I'll try and figure it out. Becky, how are you? I want to hear from you, Becky. You better write to me. Okay, have a great week.